Alright, I'm trying this again. This time I have something resembling a script. And this is the first writing pin I will be reading out for you and then sharing my thoughts and opinions on it. Tip 41, Follow Your Gut by author J.J. Hanna. I've been reading Stephen James's story Trump Structure recently, and my gosh, this is the song of my heart. When I began writing, I didn't outline, I didn't think about the world, I didn't know anything about what I was doing, except that I had a character who was handpicked by the government to be the next leader. She came from nothing, and that was the point. Every time I sat down to write, I had one incentive: learn more about this world, this character, this situation. That was it. Watch the scene, write it down. Hear what the character is saying, write it down. And yeah, like any first book, that one needed and still needs a lot of help to become something worth reading. But it was so much fun to write. I wrote for the fun of discovery. I wrote because I could. There was no pressure, no expectation, just unashamed and unabashed discovery, enjoyment, and pleasure. Then I learned to write from people who told me to be a real writer. I had to outline, so I tried that with my next book. I felt stuck at the end, so I outlined it to finish it. It flowed so well up until the point where I'd outlined it. Then it felt forced and calculated, and it was no longer fun to write or read, which is not what you want your climax to be. Anyway, the moral of this story is that you don't need to be an outline or a planner to be a writer. In fact, in many ways, the best writing comes from the least planning. Try trusting your gut. You may make something incredible. This was the first writing pin I came across as I was preparing for this video. I agree with some of it, and I strongly disagree with a lot of it. So, this is something you're going to hear a lot from me as I read a lot of these tips and a lot of these pins. It depends. Right? A lot of what she talks about here depends. Whether you're writing science fiction or fantasy, whether you're writing a mystery or a thriller or a horror, a lot of this is going to depend. It's going to depend moment by moment, chapter by chapter, character by character. It's just going to depend. She has some valid points here where there's absolutely a risk in strongly outlining your story where it will just feel like something an AI wrote. As you read it, it will feel like a robot is like talking in your head, telling the story to you in a monotone voice, right? That's a risk in too strongly outlining your story, absolutely. But there is another risk with following your gut, and that will feel like you're just throwing out ideas, like you're just throwing out words and hoping something sticks. A lot of the time, what you throw out isn't going to stick, let me tell you that much. This is actually a problem I had with my first story. Well, first, the second. Uh, that's a long story. That's something I need to talk about in another time. But the first character I really seriously wrote. Okay, let's go with that. The first character I seriously tried to write. My protagonist. With him, I tried to follow my gut. And let me tell you, my gut was wrong so many times. I was a character that I absolutely needed to write down a outline for because I was winging it way too much. Because a lot of the time they just did whatever, right? A lot of the time they were a wild card that basically did whatever they wanted, which didn't make sense for the character because he was supposed to be calculated and kind of cold. But a lot of the time, what he did felt random and chaotic. Like he was just like he suffered from bipolar disorder or something, right? It's just he just didn't flow right, and that was because I was trusting my gut too much when I should have been outlining his main personality traits, what his fears were, what his main motivation was. And that, as a matter of fact, that was another big problem with him that I realized halfway through was that he didn't really have a goal. How the heck I wrote a protagonist that didn't have a goal, I will never know, but I somehow did it, and it was absolutely terrible. Point is, and this is something if you listen to Brandon Sanderson's lectures on YouTube, you may have heard of this, as the idea that following your gut and outlining should both be tools that you use depending on the situation, right? If you're writing a character arc, a lot of the time you need to outline that. That's something you need to outline. Now, if you're writing a fantasy story and you want to create some fantastical creature, well, that's gonna depend on you, right? Do you want to focus a lot on the ecosystem, right? Are you trying to create a plausible, fantastical ecosystem in your world? Well, you're going to need to outline that. But if you just want to create some crazy creature, some crazy, fantastical creature, well, follow your gut, right? There are times where you should absolutely follow your gut, where outlining simply isn't going to work. You just have to, wing it. You just have to do it and hope it comes out right. But there are other times where your gut and your instincts are just flat out wrong. They are wrong, they are lying to you, don't trust them, think about it, outline. You should definitely leave things flexible in your story, right? Even if you're a strong outliner, or if you think you're a strong outliner, I still think you should try to keep your story at least somewhat open to flexibility, to at the very least experiment, right? Even if you don't trust your gut or your instincts, you should absolutely leave your story open enough for experimentation, to try something crazy out, to kind of go out of your comfort zone, right? But you should absolutely have even the most vague of outlines, right? Even if your outline is something like if is something like bullet points of things that happen to your characters, that's technically an outline. It's something you can follow upon. That's like a foundation that you can build up from. And, maybe sometimes you need to rip out parts of that foundation and replace it with something else. But you started out with a foundation, and from there you have something to work up from. Point is, don't take this to heart. Consider it, right? Absolutely, when you're writing, remember this tip, right? Because this tip isn't completely wrong. Everything she talks about here isn't, bad advice. Absolutely copy some of this to your brain, but don't copy all of it. And anytime you remember it, try to think really carefully if you think this actually applies to whatever it is you're writing, because it might not. Here's a bit of a modern day problem that I've come across. Please do not assume that just because my character is doing something that I, as the writer, approve of it, am romanticizing it, have a kink with regard to it, think it is okay for anyone to ever do, ever. Because sometimes my character does things that I absolutely cringe at and which are almost painful to write. But my writing a villain does not make me a villain. True words have never been spoken. This is actually a problem that I have, where I'm honestly afraid to make my protagonists do certain things because I know for a fact that there is going to be outrage, right? That I remember in the fantasy story that I ended up scrapping, by the way, in a fantasy story that I was trying to write, I had a character who was essentially the sage, the wise man, the Gandalf, right? But I kind of wanted to bend the trope a bit. I kind of wanted to subvert the trope a bit, right? I wanted to have a Gandalf character with a really, really messed up past and who had done things that I honestly believe are unredeemable, right? The point of his entire story arc in my head was going to be, does he deserve the redemption? Should he burn for what he did? Right? That was kind of a character that I wanted to write, but in the end, part of the reason why I scrapped the book is because I was afraid of what people's reaction to him would be, right? Now, that wasn't the only reason I scrapped the book. There are plenty of other reasons I scrapped that book. Well, that's a conversation for another time. Point is, this is kind of a modern day issue in writing that I've seen, right? And it's something I've especially seen with authors like Jim Butcher. So many people give Jim Butcher flack for the way his main protagonist in the Dresden Files, Dresden, the way he describes women, right? But people, a lot of the time, what they forget in those books is that that is Dresden describing the woman, right? That's not Jim Butcher, that's Dresden, right? And as somebody who has read his Furies of Calderon series, the entirety of it, I can tell you he is not what people are accusing him of being, right? He is not sexist. Absolutely not. I can tell you that for certain. As somebody who has read his Furies of Calderon series, and as somebody who has read Dresden Files right up to its last book, right? No, just no, no, no. I can especially tell you this after the last book. The last book pretty much solidified that no, 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 you're wrong.